What happens when a royal guest thinks they can control the narrative on live television? Well, you're about to find out, because today we're diving into one of the most explosive moments in daytime TV history. Prince Harry walked onto the Loose Women set expecting a soft interview. But what he got instead was Denise Welch, at her most uncompromising. Before we get into this absolute car crash of an interview, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrities who can't handle tough questions. The atmosphere in the ITV studios was already tense before the cameras even started rolling. Prince Harry had arrived with his usual entourage, expecting the kind of deferential treatment he'd grown accustomed to from the British media. But this was Loose Women, and Denise Welch wasn't about to roll out the red carpet for anyone, royal or not. As the show's opening credits rolled, Harry adjusted his tie nervously, clearly unprepared for what was about to unfold. The other panelists, Christine Lampard, Nadia Sawalha, and Kay Adams, exchanged glances that suggested they knew Denise was in one of her moods. And when Denise Welch is in a mood, absolutely nobody is safe. Right then, Denise began, barely waiting for the producer's cue. We're joined now by Prince Harry, who's here to talk about his latest ventures. Harry, thanks for coming on the show. Harry smiled that practiced royal smile he'd been perfecting since childhood. Thank you for having me, Denise. It's great to be here. But Denise wasn't buying the charm offensive. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing in that way regular viewers knew meant trouble. Is it, though? Because from what I've been reading, you've got quite a lot to say about the British media, haven't you? The smile faltered just a fraction. Well, I think it's important to have honest conversations about media responsibility and how stories are covered. Honest conversations, Denise repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. Right. So when you say the British press has been unfair to you, are you including shows like this one? Because we're British media too, aren't we? Christine tried to interject gently. What Denise is getting at, Harry, is that perhaps you could help us understand your perspective on media coverage. But Harry had already taken the bait. His jaw tightened visibly, and when he spoke there was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there moments before. I think there's a difference between responsible journalism and the kind of tabloid sensationalism that has plagued my family for decades. Tabloid sensationalism? That's quite an accusation, Denise pounced. Are you saying that any coverage that doesn't paint you in a glowing light is automatically sensationalism? That's not what I said, Harry replied, his composure starting to crack. But I think most reasonable people can see the difference between fair reporting and deliberate character assassination. The studio audience was silent now, sensing the tension building. Nadia tried to lighten the mood with a laugh. Well, this is certainly more heated than our usual Tuesday discussions about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. But Denise wasn't finished. She'd smelled blood in the water and she was circling. Character assassination? That's a very serious allegation. Harry, are you saying that when journalists report on your actions, your statements, your choices, they're assassinating your character? Harry's media training kicked in, but it was too late. The damage was done, and Denise had him exactly where she wanted him. I'm saying that there's a pattern of negative coverage that goes beyond legitimate criticism. A pattern? Denise nodded slowly, like a prosecutor who'd just heard a confession. And who decides what's legitimate criticism and what isn't? You? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Harry shifted in his seat, and, for the first time since sitting down, looked genuinely uncomfortable. The carefully constructed public persona was beginning to slip, revealing something far less polished underneath. I think anyone with common sense can make that distinction, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Denise's smile was razor-sharp. Common sense, right? So your common sense tells you that any criticism of your decisions is unfair, but our common sense should tell us that you're always in the right. Kay Adams tried to steer things back to safer ground. Perhaps we could talk about some of the positive projects you're working on, Harry. I know our viewers would be interested to hear about your charitable work. But Harry was beyond diplomatic rescue now. The careful mask had slipped too far. I came here expecting a professional interview, not some kind of ambush. And there it was, the word that would define the rest of this catastrophic appearance. Ambush. As if asking direct questions about his public statements and actions was somehow unfair play. Denise's eyebrows shot up. An ambush, she repeated, her voice rising slightly. Harry, you're on a talk show where we discuss current events and ask questions. That's literally what we do here. Did nobody explain the format to you? The condescension in her tone was unmistakable, and Harry's face flushed red. I understand the format perfectly well, thank you. What I don't understand is this hostile line of questioning. Christine tried again to calm the waters. I don't think anyone's being hostile, Harry. Denise is just doing what she always does, asking the questions viewers want answers to. But Harry was having none of it. His voice grew sharper, more imperious. These aren't questions. They're accusations dressed up as journalism. Denise laughed, sharp and humorless. Accusations? Harry, I've asked you exactly 3 questions about your own public statements. If that feels like accusations to you, maybe the problem isn't with the questions. The panelists were now watching like spectators at a tennis match, their heads turning between Denise and Harry. The studio audience had gone from politely interested to completely captivated. Harry's voice took on the tone of someone long accustomed to being above criticism. I think viewers can see exactly what's happening here. This is precisely the kind of media behavior I've been talking about. Oh, is it now? Denise leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. So when you go on international television and make serious allegations about your own family, about this country, about our institutions, that's just you telling your truth. But when someone asks you to explain those allegations, that's media behavior. That's completely different, Harry snapped, his composure now hanging by a thread. Different how? Denise pressed. Because you're the one talking instead of being asked questions. Because you get to control the narrative when you're the invited guest, you usually don't have to defend your positions. But here, the dynamic was different. Nadia tried again to diffuse the tension. Perhaps we're getting a bit off track. Harry, why don't you tell us about some of the positive changes you're hoping to make? Harry, however, was past the point of recovery. His face was flushed, his jaw locked in that familiar stubborn line audiences had seen before in other uncomfortable interviews. I don't think I should have to defend speaking my truth to people who've already made up their minds. The phrase, my truth, hung in the air like a challenge, and Denise pounced. Your truth? That's an interesting way to put it, Harry. What about the truth? You know, the facts everyone can agree on. Harry's voice rose. The facts are that my family and I have been subjected to years of invasive, inaccurate, and often malicious coverage. Invasive coverage of public figures doing public duties with public money. Denise shot back without hesitation. Shocking behavior from the press. How dare they report on what you do in public? Christine looked worried now. I think maybe we should take a step back here, she suggested. But the conversation was already hurtling toward disaster. Harry's voice turned cold. I came here in good faith to have a civilized discussion. And I am having a civilized discussion, Denise replied smoothly. I'm asking you direct questions about your public statements. If that feels uncivilized, maybe the issue isn't with my questions. The issue, Harry snapped, his voice tight with frustration, is that you're not listening to what I'm actually saying. You're just looking for gotcha moments. Denise's smile was sharp. Oh, I'm listening. You're saying that when you speak publicly, it should be accepted without question. But when others speak publicly about you, that's unfair treatment. Do I have that right? That's not what I'm saying at all, Harry protested, but the conviction was gone from his voice. Then what are you saying? Denise pressed. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you want the right to criticize everyone else, but get offended when someone asks you to explain your criticisms. Kay tried one last time to mediate. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. There's no misunderstanding, Harry said firmly. What there is a perfect example of exactly the kind of hostile media environment I've been talking about. And there it was, the moment that would echo across social media. A grown man, a prince, calling a straightforward interview a hostile environment because someone dared to ask follow-up questions. Denise's expression shifted from sharp to almost disbelieving. Hostile environment? Harry, you're sitting in a comfortable chair on a daytime talk show being asked about things you've said publicly. If this is hostile, what do you call actual hardship? I call this exactly the kind of media manipulation that drives people away from public service, Harry replied, his voice now openly combative. Media manipulation? Denise repeated, incredulous. I've asked you to explain your own words. That's manipulation? The other panelists were visibly uncomfortable. Christine fidgeted with her notes. Nadia stared down at the desk, and Kay kept glancing toward the production booth, silently praying for a commercial break that wasn't coming. Denise leaned forward. You know what, Harry? I think our viewers are smart enough to see exactly what's happening here. You came on this show expecting softball questions and deference because of who you are. That's absolutely not true, Harry protested, but it rang hollow. Isn't it? Denise challenged. Because the moment someone treats you like any other guest, asks you the same questions we'd ask anyone else, you start talking about ambushes and hostile environments. Harry's composure snapped. His voice rose, raw and angry. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by someone who clearly has an agenda. The studio went completely silent. Denise raised an eyebrow, her voice dangerously quiet. An agenda? And what agenda would that be, Harry? Harry, too far in to retreat, doubled down. The agenda of making me look bad to boost your ratings. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Denise stared at him for a long moment. Then her voice turned icy. Making you look bad? Harry, I haven't made you do anything. I've asked questions. You chose how to respond. If that makes you look bad, maybe the problem isn't with the questions. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Harry had just accused a seasoned broadcaster of orchestrating a smear for ratings, and Denise looked like she was about to deliver her sharpest blow yet. Boost my ratings, she repeated slowly, her voice dropping lower. A tone everyone familiar with her knew was dangerous. So, let me get this straight, Harry. You think I've ambushed you, created a hostile environment, and now I'm apparently conducting some kind of personal vendetta against you for ratings? Harry, perhaps realizing he'd gone too far but too proud to back down, doubled down instead. I think it's clear what's happening here. This isn't journalism. It's entertainment at my expense. That was the moment Denise Welch truly lost her patience. Her voice, when she spoke, cut through the studio like a blade. Entertainment at your expense? You came on this show voluntarily, Harry. Nobody forced you to be here. Nobody forced you to make the public statements I've asked you about. And nobody is forcing you to sit there acting like a spoiled child because someone dared to ask you follow-up questions. The other panelists looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. Christine stared at the production booth, clearly hoping someone would intervene. But the producers, recognizing television gold when they saw it, let it play out. Harry's face went from red to purple. Spoiled child? How dare you speak to me like that? And there it was. The entitled fury that had been bubbling under the surface finally erupted. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered completely, revealing the petulant, entitled mindset beneath. Denise's smile was arctic. How dare I? Harry, you're sitting on my show accusing me of having an agenda, calling legitimate questions an ambush, and now you're telling me how I'm allowed to speak to you. Who exactly do you think you are? I know exactly who I am, Harry shot back, his voice rising to a level completely inappropriate for daytime television. And I know I don't have to tolerate this kind of treatment from anyone. The studio audience was now completely riveted. This wasn't just a celebrity having a bad interview. This was a full-scale meltdown happening live on air. Nadia made one final attempt to restore some dignity. Perhaps we should take a moment to calm down here. But Harry was beyond calming down. He was in full entitled prince mode now, and it was not a good look. Calm down? I'm perfectly calm. What I am is disgusted by this ambush interview disguised as legitimate journalism. Denise had heard enough. Her voice, when she responded, was steady, but absolutely final. Right, that's enough. Harry, you've called this an ambush. You've accused me of having an agenda. You've suggested I'm manipulating you for ratings. And now you're lecturing me about journalism while throwing a tantrum because someone asked you to explain your own words. I am not throwing a tantrum, Harry protested, though the crack in his voice betrayed his indignation. Aren't you? Denise shot back. Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who expected to come on this show and be treated like royalty. Literally. And now you're having a meltdown because I treated you like any other guest. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the studio floor. I don't have to listen to this. The gesture was clearly meant to be dramatic, a power move to regain control of the situation. But instead of looking dignified, he looked exactly like what Denise had accused him of being, a spoiled child storming off when things didn't go his way. Denise didn't even blink. No, you don't. There's the door, Harry. You're absolutely free to leave whenever you want. The casualness of her response clearly wasn't what Harry expected. He'd obviously thought his dramatic gesture would prompt apologies and attempts to keep him there. Instead, he was being shown the exit. This is exactly the kind of media treatment that destroys people, he said. But his voice lacked the conviction it had carried earlier. What destroys people, Denise replied evenly, is believing that your title makes you immune to the same questions everyone else gets asked. Christine made one last desperate attempt at damage control. Harry, please, why don't you sit back down and we can start fresh? But Harry was too far gone, too deep into his wounded pride to accept any kind of olive branch. Start fresh? After I've been insulted and ambushed on live television? Kay Adams, who had been largely silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up. Harry, I think you might be overreacting here. Overreacting? Harry's voice shot up an octave. I've been subjected to a character assassination on live television, and you think I'm overreacting? That was the final straw for Denise. She'd given him multiple opportunities to salvage the situation, to step back from the brink, to show some dignity. Instead, he'd chosen to escalate at every turn. Right, she said, her voice cutting through Harry's protest like a knife. I think it's time for you to leave, Harry. This interview is over. The words hung in the air like a judge's gavel. Harry stared at her in apparent disbelief, as if he couldn't quite process that he was being asked to leave. You're throwing me off the show? He asked, his voice smaller now. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. I'm ending an interview that stopped being productive the moment you decided that answering questions was beneath you, Denise replied firmly. Harry looked around the studio as if expecting someone to come to his rescue, to tell Denise she couldn't possibly kick a prince off live television. But the other panelists avoided his gaze, and the production crew remained conspicuously absent. This will be all over the papers tomorrow, he said, making one final attempt at a threat. Denise's smile was sharp as a razor. Yes, it will. And viewers will be able to see exactly what happened here. They'll see you being asked fair questions and choosing to have a meltdown instead of providing answers. And with that, Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, walked off the Loose Women set, leaving behind one of the most explosive daytime television moments in recent memory. So, there you have it. the complete breakdown of how Prince Harry managed to get himself kicked off Loose Women after what can only be described as an epic meltdown. What did you think of Harry's behavior? Did Denise go too far? Or was she exactly as tough as she needed to be? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about celebrities who just can't handle the heat.